Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into two really significant ideas in modern sociology.
That's right, feminism and postmodernism. Big topics.
Absolutely. And our goal here is to, well, distill the core insights from some key sociological texts, give you a shortcut, really, to getting your head around these sometimes complex concepts.
Yeah, these are often called peer theories, sort of the foundational blueprints sociologists use.
Exactly. Frameworks for making sense of things. So how do we make sense of, the world today? It often feels so complex, fragmented even.
And these two perspectives offer, well, quite different lenses, wouldn't you say?
Wildly different, but both powerful. Traditional sociology often searched for these big universal truths.
Like laws of society.
Right. But the ideas we're exploring today, they really challenge that. They shake it up a bit, offer some surprising ways of looking at things.
Definitely invites a rethink.
Okay, let's get into it. We'll start by looking at feminist theories.
A really diverse field.
It is. But they generally share a core belief, right? That society is fundamentally patriarchal.
Yes, structured in a way that's dominated by men.
And this structure, they argue, leads directly to the oppression, the subordination of women.
And their collective goal, despite the differences, is to challenge that.
Yeah.
To push for gender equality.
So let's break down some of those different strands. First up, there's liberal feminism.
Okay, so liberal feminism is essentially reformist. They're not looking to tear down the whole system, necessarily.
Or about working within it.
Exactly. They believe gender inequality comes mainly from, well, a lack of equal opportunities and, very importantly, unfair laws or discriminatory practices.
Right, so tangible things you can change.
Precisely. Their focus is heavily on using legal and political channels. Think about the fight for equal pay laws, for example.
Or ending discrimination in hiring, things like that.
Yes. The idea is if you change the rules, you create a more level playing field. Fix the system's biases.
Okay, that makes sense. Change the laws, change the opportunities. But does that perspective fully capture maybe deeper cultural issues? Or is it the focus really on those formal structures?
That's a key point. For liberal feminists, the primary target is those systemic barriers, the laws, the formal discrimination. They tend to believe that achieving that formal legal equality is the main step.
And maybe cultural shifts follow from that.
That's often the assumption, yes. Address the formal inequality first.
Okay. So if liberal feminism works largely within the existing system, Marxist feminism takes a very different tack. It points the finger squarely at capitalism.
Completely different focus. Marxist feminism argues that women's subordination isn't just allowed by capitalism, it's actually a direct result of it. It's baked into the system.
How so? What's the connection they draw?
Well, they highlight the massive amount of unpaid labor women typically perform in the home. Cooking, cleaning, childcare.
The domestic sphere.
Right. And they argue this isn't just personal stuff. It directly serves capitalism because it reproduces the workforce, the next generation of workers, essentially for free. The system doesn't pay for that vital work.
So women's work in the home props up the whole economic structure.
That's the core argument. And because of that, they believe you can't achieve real liberation for women without fundamentally changing the economic system.
Meaning overthrowing capitalism.
For most Marxist feminists, yes. True liberation requires moving beyond the capitalist model entirely.
That's a powerful claim. But, critics might say gender inequality existed before capitalism, right? How does Marxist feminism account for that?
That's a common counterargument. They'd likely respond that while pre-capitalist forms of patriarchy existed, capitalism seized upon them, reshaped them, and intensified them for its own economic benefit. It made use of existing inequalities.
I see. It kind of co-opted and deepened those structures.
Something like that, yes.
Okay, moving on then. There's another perspective that views patriarchy itself as the absolute root of the problem, even more fundamental than capitalism, perhaps. That's radical feminism.
Exactly. Radical feminists argue that patriarchy isn't just an issue, it's the primary, most fundamental form of inequality. Full stop.
More fundamental than class or race.
For them, yes. They see male dominance as the oldest, most pervasive form of oppression and argue that all men, as a group, benefit from the exploitation of women.
All men. That's a strong statement.
It is. And they see this male dominance as the root cause underpinning many other social problems. Their focus often lands heavily on issues like male violence against women.
And they're often critical of traditional institutions.
Very critical. Institutions like marriage, for example, are often viewed as tools that institutionalize male control and female subordination.
So, if patriarchy is that deeply embedded, what's the solution for radical feminists? Is it about reform or something more drastic?
Given how fundamental they see the problem, the solutions often lean towards radical transformation rather than just incremental change. It's about dismantling patriarchal structures at their very root.
A complete reimagining of social relations.
In many cases, yes. Though specific strategies can vary, the end goal is often that profound shift.
It's quite striking, isn't it? You have these very different feminist perspectives,
Liberal, Marxist, radical.
each identifying different root causes and proposing different solutions. Legal reform, economic revolution, dismantling patriarchy itself.
Yet, despite that diversity, they all share that fundamental goal. Challenging male dominance and striving for genuine gender equality. They just offer different maps for understanding the problem and different routes towards change.
Right. So feminism gives us these powerful tools for analyzing power, specifically gendered power. Now let's shift gears dramatically to postmodernism. This feels like a really different kind of challenge to traditional thinking.
It absolutely is. Think about those earlier thinkers we mentioned, like Marx or Durkheim. They were searching for grand theories, universal truths about how society works.
And big picture explanations.
Exactly. Postmodernists basically say, hold on, maybe that's not possible anymore. Or perhaps it never was, but it's especially impossible now.
Why now? What's changed?
They argue we're living in a postmodern era, an era marked by incredible diversity, a lot of uncertainty, and crucially, a loss of faith in those grand narratives.
Grand narratives, those big, all-encompassing stories.
Yes, like Marxism or religious doctrines, or even the idea of inevitable scientific progress. These big theories that claim to explain everything about history, society, and the human condition. Postmodernists are deeply skeptical of them.
Why the skepticism? What's wrong with big explanations?
They argue that society has become too fragmented, too complex and diverse for any single theory to capture it all. Think about globalization, the rise of digital media, the sheer variety of lifestyles and beliefs.
It's too messy for one neat story.
That's the idea. Those grand narratives, they argue, often smoothed over differences or imposed a single viewpoint. Postmodernism suggests they're no longer convincing or relevant. It's more about acknowledging multiple truths, multiple perspectives, mini-narratives perhaps.
Okay, so if the big stories about society are questioned, what does postmodernism say about us, about individuals? Our identity.
That leads to the concept of fluid identity. This is a really key postmodern idea.
Fluid meaning?
Meaning our identity isn't seen as fixed or determined by categories like social class, gender, or nationality in the way it might have been viewed before.
So I'm not just defined by my job or where I was born?
Not solely, no. Postmodernists see identity as more like something you construct, something you choose. It's fluid, adaptable, you piece it together, often through consumer choices, lifestyle choices, how you present yourself online.
Like curating a personal brand?
In a way, yes, you're actively building and rebuilding who you are, rather than just accepting a pre-assigned label.
But surely those traditional categories, class, background, nationality, they still matter, don't they? They haven't just vanished.
Oh, absolutely. Postmodernists wouldn't deny they exist or have influence. The difference is they're seen less as rigid boxes that define you and more as resources, influences, or maybe even constraints that you navigate, draw upon, or perhaps consciously reject when you're building that fluid sense of self.
So they're part of the toolkit, but not the whole instruction manual?
That's a good way to put it. They don't dictate the final product in the same deterministic way.
Now, there's one postmodern thinker, Jean Baudrillard, who introduced a really mind-bending concept, hyperreality. What's that about?
Right, Baudrillard. His idea of hyperreality is, well, it's provocative. He argued that in our media-saturated world, the lines between reality and simulation or fiction have become incredibly blurred, maybe even collapsed.
Blurred how?
We're surrounded by so many images, signs, media representations, things that often don't even refer back to an original real thing. They're simulations that take on a life of their own.
Can you give an example?
Think about reality TV. It presents itself as reality, but it's heavily edited, scripted, constructed. Or think about perfectly curated social media profiles. These images and representations circulate and become so pervasive, so influential, that they start to feel more real than reality itself. The simulation replaces the real.
So the copy becomes more important than the original.
Or the copy exists without an original. Baudrillard called this the simulacrum. It's a world of signs pointing only to other signs, disconnected from any underlying reality. Deepfakes are maybe an extreme contemporary example.
Wow. Okay. So putting these postmodern ideas together, the rejection of grand narratives, fluid identity, hyperreality, how does this challenge our basic understanding of the world?
It challenges it profoundly. It suggests that truth might be relative or fragmented, that our identities are shifting constructions, and that what we perceive as real might be deeply mediated, maybe even simulated. It kind of pulls the rug out from under a lot of certainties.
It definitely makes you question what you see and experience.
Exactly. If identity is fluid, maybe that explains why my taste in music keeps changing. Or maybe not. But it certainly makes us think about how we navigate a world where solid ground seems harder to find.
So let's try and connect these dots. We've looked at feminism, which gives us sharp tools to analyze specific power dynamics, particularly gender.
Focusing on inequality and the structures that maintain it.
And then postmodernism, which does something different. It questions the very foundations of knowledge, truth, reality, identity itself. How do these seemingly very different perspectives help us grapple with modern life?
Well, I think having both in your toolkit is incredibly useful. They offer different but complementary ways of seeing. Feminism helps you dissect specific power relations and inequalities you see playing out in politics, in the workplace, in culture.
It gives you a lens for analyzing who has power and how it's used, especially regarding gender.
Precisely. And postmodernism. It pushes you to question the narratives themselves, to ask, where does this story come from? Whose truth is being presented? How is reality being constructed here, especially through media?
So one helps analyze the power structures within the story, the other helps analyze the story itself and whether it's even real.
There's a neat way to put it. So, if you're reading about, say, the gender pay gap, feminism offers frameworks, liberal, Marxist, radical, to understand why it exists. Postmodernism might prompt you to look at how that issue is represented in the media, what narratives are spun around it, whose voices are amplified or silenced.
Right, and thinking about hyperreality when you're scrolling through Instagram, seeing those perfect lives.
Exactly. You can immediately recognize that as a potential simulation, a curated reality, thanks to someone like Baudrillard. It gives you critical distance.
So understanding these isn't just academic. It actually equips you, the listener, to be a more critical consumer of information, a more nuanced observer of social issues, and maybe even more reflective about your own experiences and identity.
Absolutely. They're tools for thinking critically about the complex worlds we live in. They encourage us to look beneath the surface.
Well, that brings us towards the end of this particular deep dive. We've journeyed through the really diverse and powerful ideas within feminism and then explored the radical, sometimes unsettling perspectives of postmodernism.
From challenging patriarchy to questioning reality itself, it's quite a range.
It really is. It shows how sociology tries to grapple with power, identity, and truth in our times. So, here's a final thought to leave you with. In a world that seems increasingly shaped by these dynamics, by power struggles, fluid identities, and these blurred lines between the real and the simulated, what responsibility do we each have to critically examine the narratives we encounter every day? And maybe more personally, how does grappling with these ideas shape your own understanding of what truth even means?
A lot to think about there.
Definitely. Something to ponder until our next deep dive. Thanks for joining us.